Hey, what's up, YouTube? So this is most likely going to be my last video in my 2016 predictions there, and I'm going to finish it up with electric cars. And this very well could be the year that the electric cars start rolling out. There's some out there, but it really hasn't caught on. I think it's hard to say what would it take to catch on. There's two classes of consumers when it comes to like things like cars and electric cars, and you have what I call the enthusiasts. Those are the guys that are kind of like take it apart, figure out what makes it tick, and get in there and make it run and do things it was never intended to do. And there's a sequence of things that they can do that are very repeatable, and it usually collects a following. My favorite example is the Honda Civics from '92 to 2000. If you just Google around, you'll see the whole series is very interchangeable. So you could get like a hand-me-down car from your parents or something like that. Maybe it didn't have a lot of bells and whistles in it, but you could go to the high-end Civic and pull out all those parts, and they would bolt right on to your low-end one, and you could soup it up inexpensively. And also, or you could go to a wrecking yard and take parts off of nicer cars. Also, then they had other than the Civic series, you have like the Integra series that has a beefier engine in it, and a lot of people take those engines out of the kind of like the sports models and put them in the domestic low-end models, and you have like a sleeper car, which means the car looks like it's just a low-end model, but it's got some high-performance parts under the hood, and it really picks up. And it was very easy to work on, and I think that was one of the key elements to this Honda's Civic success. Anyhow, I think something like that would need to happen for the electric car if it were to take off. Maybe somebody realizes you could take a certain easily obtainable electric motor and battery and some kind of transmission, and usually the transmission interface is kind of the tricky part. And but if somebody would be able to get these off-the-shelf parts and say, hey, if you got one of these, especially if it was a popular, inexpensive, readily available chassis that you could just kind of like convert over, I think you would see it take off. Like, it would really take off in the enthusiast market. Now, the other type of market you need is the people that don't care about the technology, they just want the cool factor. They get in the car and it just works. They don't even understand how the car works or whatever. They just know they get a very good experience out of it. And that's your majority of your consumers. If you notice when you watch a car commercial, very seldom do they tell you technical specifications about the car or any meaningful technical specifications. They might throw out something like, oh, this has got so many horsepower and or the biggest something in its class, but they really don't. For people who really understand cars, they really don't tell you enough about the cars. They just throw out buzzwords and marketing stuff. But most of the car commercials don't even do that. They'll just like kind of put like a soccer mom experience for selling an SUV, showing a lady taking her kids to the soccer game or something, and the whole team's cheering because they all packed all the people in the van or something, and they made it through a puddle or something like that. And it completely doesn't tell you anything about the car, and they're trying to sell the experience of the vehicle as opposed to knowing anything about it. And that's the majority of how sales seem to go these days. They're just trying to sell you on the experience, get you excited about if you own this product. You'll feel good, and really don't tell you much about the product. And that's actually, when you think about it, a lot of advertising is like that across the board for just about anything. They'll throw a few little tidbits of tech info just to make it sound techy, but it's not really, from a technical person standpoint, it's not really telling you anything worth knowing or that you could understand that would give you any insights into the technology of it, because they feel the consumer doesn't care about that. And for the bulk, unfortunately for the bulk, consumer doesn't care about that. It's the enthusiast guys, and they usually know more about the product than even the manufacturer. There's people in the manufacturing industry know that, but there's only maybe a handful, and the bulk of the people for responsible for that product probably don't know as much about that product as enthusiasts do, because they've taken it apart, several of them, put them back together in ways that weren't necessarily intended, and they know the weak points of that product and the strengths of it and stuff like that. Anyhow, kind of got a little bit long-winded there, but also, if it caught on, and again, it's got to be kind of easy to do because it's gas cars are a lot of fun. If you look at kind of like the drag race community, so to speak, the guys around the quarter mile and stuff like that, everything about the car is fun to work on. It sounds good. You get the thrill, the speed, everything. And it's just been like that for years. And suddenly, if an electric car comes along, two things are going to happen. Some guy's going to, and I'll put some links to one of my favorite electric cars. It's called the White Zombie inside the video description below, and you can see a little bit about that. It's like a 72 Datsun or something like that. So if one of those shows up next to like a Porsche or something like that, or any souped up car, and they're like, "Hey, you want to race?" If they once they've raced against an electric car, then it's almost like saying, "Hey, do you want to race against a motorcycle or something?" It's just like it's in a different class, and it's not even fair. And so as soon as people start realizing if they're going to race, it'd only take a couple races for them to realize, man, I do not want to race an electric car in a quarter mile. And it would almost have to make a separate class of racing. And also everything that everybody's learned in the combustion engine race car scene, like 90% of it gets thrown out the window. And because all the problems that have been solved in the combustion engine industry, they're almost like non-issues. You have different problems in the electric industry, but when you stop and think about all the neat things you get from an electric car, like your coolant system, now you probably still need a coolant system, but you don't need as aggressive of one. I mean, look how many problems revolve around radiator leaks, heater core leaks, water pump leaks, hoses leaking, the toxicity of the antifreeze. And that's just dealing with just the cooling element of a combustion engine. You got your fuel tank. It's amazing that in the industry that they've gotten the fuel tank so safe in the way the whole fuel delivery system. I think I heard somewhere like a gallon of gas is like equivalent to 9 sticks of dynamite. It's amazing when you think about that we have car accidents and the cars instantly explode. I mean, eventually, sometimes it happens, but very rarely, and not in a violent manner like that. And the whole fuel injection problems you have, fuel filters, changing your oil. Granted, you probably still need to do a little bit of oil change, but it would never be nowhere clear in comparison to what you need in a combustion engine compared to an electric. There's just so many problems that go away. The weight factor, an engine's pretty heavy. Modern engines, like an all-aluminum ones, they're getting pretty light. So, but like an old Chevy 350, that thing's pretty heavy compared to, all aluminum engine. And some electric motors are heavy, but the technology is evolving pretty quickly to where you're getting pretty high torques with low power or low weight ratios. Your batteries are pretty heavy, but the technology is really driving forward because of so many different factors. Pretty soon, the battery's not going to be an argument. And actually, there was a period in history where there was more electric cars on the road than there were gas cars. And it's pretty weird how they were able to market around it. It used to be an electric car was something like the rich people had. And, like you picture some lady back in, 1800s, I don't know when they had them, wearing a dress and stuff, and she could drive her electric car around town, and it's very smooth, and it wasn't all pollutant and stuff. And then here comes this, think of the old Model A's or Model T's, I don't even remember what they were, that you see the first Fords that came out, and they were backfiring, and you had to crank the handle, and it could actually break your arm if you did it wrong, and very violent and jerky motions and stuff. And compared to the electric cars at the time, they were battery driven, and they were just very quiet, smooth. Anybody could operate it. And along comes this big thing belching out smoke, firing off backfires, and is kind of hard to start and everything. And it's amazing. I don't understand how they were able to convince the public to go away from electric. Maybe because the horsepower is so much better than the gas, but I don't know. This is early on. Um, but anyways, my point was there was a time when there was more electric cars on the road than there was gas cars, and gas cars finally took over as they made progress in. It was probably a gradual thing. As they made progress in technology, and finally, probably when the electric starter came out, I don't even know what they did before that. After you got rid of the hand crank, that's probably what was the clincher when you didn't have to get out and hand crank your car anymore. That probably put the nail in the coffin for the electric car. But it's amazing that it didn't keep going. That's kind of weird too. But anyhow, I think we're going to see electric cars in this year, if not very shortly. And like I said, there are already electric cars. But when I say electric cars, I mean like people that own electric cars, and it could happen to the enthusiasts. I mean, if I had a garage and had some money and I didn't have to worry about the two, I'd probably try to build myself an electric car. In fact, I would build myself an electric car. I don't have the space or the time or the money. But if those factors weren't involved, I'd totally be about trying to do it. So, anyhow, I guess that's going to be my last prediction is going to be you're going to see electric cars take off, and they're going to slowly displace gas cars just because there's so many advantages with the current technologies that we have. And I'll go into one thing. When you put a gas engine, like with 200 horsepower inside or higher, inside a car, think about how much torque you got on those engine motor mounts and stuff, and that thing's shaking. The car has to be kind of heavy enough to handle that gas engine to begin with. And if you're designing an electric car, those motor mounts can be redesigned differently, and you could probably get away with they got fiberglass cars now. You could probably be looking at like a hybrid plastic type thing, and it should be pretty easily to do and stuff like that. So imagine how much more that's going to cut down your weight factor. And because you don't have such a high mass, think of it, when you have an impact with a traditional heavy gas engine, your front end of your car's got to be able to withstand it. It could totally revolutionize the way a car is designed. And with like the autonomous vehicles out there, they're a natural mesh for the electronics because they already got to have a lot of computers to run the autonomous parts, and it's simply a matter of handing off a few more. It's not that much of a computer that you'd need to run an electric motor efficiently. And then one last thing I'd like to say is there is a pretty big space where I don't know why they don't do this. If you look at trains, how much pulling power they have, American trains that is, and a lot of people don't realize those are diesel. They look like they're diesel engines, but they're diesel generators running an electric motor. The train's really an electric motor, electric engine. It's just using the diesel power to fire generators for that. And that's how come they can have instant torque, and they can edge forward and backwards really easy and smoothly. You don't have to worry about a transmission problem. To where in a gas engine, if you need a lot of torque from zero or dead stop, it's hard to do because the RPMs have to rev up. It's just on an engineering standpoint, especially when you're pulling a lot of weight like a train is. The electric motors are better for that kind of stuff. And they could do something like that in the auto industry where you have a small gas-powered generator. If you could crank out the amps, you got the best of both worlds there. You'd have the long distance because you're running a gas-powered generator, and the generator wouldn't have to rev up RPMs and stuff. You could have it set at fixed intervals. So you could have like a low power interval and then like a high power interval. And what I'm saying by that is you could run the RPMs at a fixed rate, and it's not varying. Like if you look at your car engine, when you accelerate, you're constantly increasing the RPMs and decreasing the RPMs over and over and over again, from low to high, low to high, low to high. It's pretty stressful. If you took a look at a generator, it usually runs, hits its RPMs, and then stays at that RPM indefinitely until you turn it off. And that sustained revolutions of the motor makes the life of that motor last a lot longer, and it's a lot more fuel efficient. So you could take a small motor, like Honda should do something like this, because Honda makes really good lawnmowers and generators and stuff. they could make an automotive generator that's gas powered that you could just drop in, and you could run this small generator to power your electric motor, and you'd have the advantages of having a quick off-the-line time, and you'd have the amperage right there that you needed. And you could even have a little, in conjunction with a small battery. That's kind of like what the Prius and stuff try to do, but just it hasn't been done as good as I think they could have done it. The only downside to mixing motors like that, it makes the system a lot more complex than it needs to be. It's so much easier to go all electric. In fact, it's easier to go all electric than it is to go gas. But it's just a matter of the infrastructure for it. But even that's pretty doable, not too hard. Actually, gas is a very hard system when you think about it. We truck fulls of gasolines to stations where you drive up and fill up and stuff. It's kind of weird when you think of all the trouble that we go through to make the gasoline engine work. Anyhow, that being said, quit rambling here, and I'll just finish it up. And hear my prediction. If you don't like it, don't get mad at me. I don't make the future, only predict it. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. And if you subscribe, you'll see more videos as they come out. Also, if you have any comments or questions about electric vehicles, feel free to leave them below. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it. Thank you.